Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the session 5 Easy Tricks How to Find Great Candidates Online. For this session, Ceipal is joined by James Boshier, Head of Partner Success, CV Library, and Resume Library. But before we launch into today's session, there are a few housekeeping items to cover. First, each session will be recorded and available on demand through Ceipal's website. A follow-up email will be sent to all registrants with the recording and any other relevant material. Second, we'll have a Q&A session following the discussion. All participants have entered the session muted. So please enter your questions in the questions tab on your right-hand menu and we'll address them at the end of the panel. And finally, we are on a strict schedule today. To save time for a Q&A period, I'll give a 5-minute warning to all speakers. After the 5-minute warning, the speaker will conclude the conversation and will open for Q&A. Please note that this session will end promptly at the scheduled time. At that point, we encourage you to visit our agenda tab and explore our other topics and speakers in the 4 different tracks. If you do not visit the agenda tab, you'll be automatically redirected to the next session in this track. That's it, and now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today. James Boshier is the Head of Partner Success at CV Library and Resume Library. He focuses on allowing recruiters and hiring managers to search Resume Library's database of 25 million plus resumes from within ATS and any other HR tech platforms. James has worked in recruitment technology for over 8 years and is passionate about using technology to help people get jobs. Thank you so much for joining, James. Over to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for the intro, Tasneem. And good morning, afternoon, and good evening to everyone here's on the session today. Let me share the slides and we can jump straight into it. Hopefully that is all visible and everyone can see that. As Tasneem said, I'm the Head of Partner Success for Resume Library, and we are one of the largest independent job boards and resume databases, and we operate in the US as Resume Library, and also in the UK and Europe as CV Library. Now, in today's session, we're going to cover a lot about candidate sourcing. So we're going to cover 5 easy tricks to find great candidates online. Now, we've been partnering with Ceipal for the last few years, really glad to be invited back to the session again this year. So keen to try and keep this session as interactive as possible. So I was going to start us off with a bit of a poll, which should hopefully be appearing on screen in a sec. So I just want to get a bit of a feel for the amount of sourcing that people are doing at the moment. So in the last 12 months, if you go and answer on the poll, the amount of time that you've spent sourcing candidates online, has that increased? Has it decreased? Stayed the same? Or actually, do you not source candidates online? Do you just use sort of applications for your vacancies? So I'll give that another second and see if we get any more in. But yeah, very interesting. So far, it looks like there's definitely a skew on increases in sourcing, which is very much what we're seeing at the moment. Another 2 seconds. Awesome, great. Well, thank you very much. So let me go back to the slides and we can pick back up on some of the other polls later on. Now, some of the main bits we're going to be run through today is why most recruiters, when they're searching candidates online, when they're looking through resume databases, the vast majority only really scratch the surface. So when most recruiters are searching on resume databases, they're only searching through 1% of the candidates and the talent that are in those databases. Now, I'm sure that everyone on here is very aware that there's a very high shortage of talent at the moment, with lots of publications saying that businesses are finding it notably harder to recruit staff. There's been a massive increase in job vacancies, but the amount of available candidates has stayed pretty flat, and in many countries that's actually decreased. So it's kind of a perfect storm where there's an increase in jobs, a decrease in candidates that are actually looking at the moment. In the US, for example, it's predicted that unemployment might even go below 3% this year. So this isn't a short-term issue. This is something that we see to actually be going on for quite a while now. And what that's really caused is that people that are using a more traditional way of finding candidates, so through posting jobs and letting people apply online, the costs for those sort of channels are increasing quite a lot. So what we've seen for Resume Library and CV Library, we've seen a real big increase over the last 12 months. So compared to January last year, we've seen a 42% increase in people subscribing for access to our resume database. To put that into context, sort of pre-pandemic, we were seeing anywhere between sort of 5 and 10% growth for our resume database subscriptions every year. So 42% is a massive, massive change. And actually, when people have got subscriptions to our database and they're actually searching for those candidates, we're actually seeing that recruiters are running more and more searches. So the number of searches in the last 12 months has over doubled. So 130% increase in activity for recruiters searching through our database. So we're just going to flip back for two more quick poll questions. So one of the key areas that I'm sure many of you will be trying to measure is the cost per application that you're currently spending as a business. So how much is it costing for you to get one applicant into your job? So yeah, we really encourage you to answer this poll. If you don't currently track average CPAs, that's absolutely fine. Yeah, select the I don't know option because that's actually quite an interesting thing as well. We'll touch on that slightly in a second. For anyone that hasn't been tracking CPA, there's quite a simple way of doing it. So at the real highest level, you can purely look at how much have you spent in the last 12 months on advertising jobs and attracting those candidates, and then you divide that by the number of applicants you've had over the last year. Now, I'm sure many of you will go into more detail and look by industry, by location and things like that. But if anyone's not tracking this at the moment, that's where I'd suggest to start. Awesome. Great. And then if we move on to the third and final poll, and I promise you won't have to do any more work for a little bit, is on that CPA, on the average cost per application. It'd be really interesting to know whether you've seen any changes in the last 12 months. So have you seen that you're spending more over the last 12 months for applicants? Has it decreased? Or any of those other options on screen? Lovely. Thank you very much. Well, just to put that into context, if we're looking at some sort of wider market research, in the US, the average cost per application at the moment is anywhere between $25 and $50. Now, that obviously depends quite a lot based on the industries and the locations, but just to give you a feel, that's the rough cost at this moment in time. And that's changed massively over the last few years. So if you go back a few years pre-pandemic, it was around sort of $11. So, double, maybe even triple just over the last few years. Awesome. Yeah, thank you very much for the poll. And we will jump back in to the rest of the slides. Great. So because of those rising cost per applications, as we say, it's leading to us seeing more and more people spending more time sourcing candidates and trying to tap into proactive and in some instances passive candidates as well. And that's really where Resume Library and CV Library come in. We've got a database of over 25 million candidates across the US, UK and parts of Europe. And one of the main differences with us rather than some other sort of candidate search tools out there is that we aren't just aggregating online profiles that are already publicly available. All of our candidates are job seekers that have knowingly uploaded a resume. They've created a profile for the pure purpose of the fact that they want to search and find jobs, and also to be contacted by employers to find if there's any other opportunities for them. So it's not only quite an extensive database, but actually the quality we find is really, really good. It's people that are knowingly wanting to be contacted and are looking for new opportunities. Now, we're currently trusted by over 12,000 clients, and we're used by a whole range of different companies. So, it could be large corporate enterprises, could be staffing agencies, and actually is also in some cases small companies that are potentially only sort of making one or two hires within the year. Now, the great news is that we're fully integrated with inside Ceipal. So if you want to search our database, you don't have to leave the Ceipal ATS. You can do the vast majority of the features that we offer straight inside Ceipal. So it's a nice and seamless user experience, and also very easy to then transfer those candidates into your talent pool and shortlist them onto jobs. Right. So now let's get into the meat of it. So let's jump into the 5 insider tips for how to find more candidates online through sourcing. Now, we'll start with probably the most complicated one, and I'm sure many of you on here will be familiar with Boolean and are using Boolean searches, but we always find it's a great place to start off as a bit of a refresher. And that's because it can be quite complicated at times, and it's very easy to make simple mistakes, and those simple mistakes can massively impact how many candidates you're finding in these sorts of tools. So in Boolean, there's 3 main commands, or 3 main operators is the I suppose the technical term for it. So you've got ands, ors, and nots. So an and is used when you're looking for candidates that have both of the keywords specified. So in this instance, you're just seeing the cross section of people that have skills in both sales and marketing. Whereas on the other hand, an or is expanding the search. So an or is looking for candidates that contain either of those 2 keywords, so sales or marketing. Any CV, resume, profile that contains either of those words will be returned in the search. And then finally, a not is used for excluding certain candidates from the results that you're potentially not wanting to include for whatever reason. So for example, in this instance, sales, not marketing, looks for candidates that have the keyword of sales, but excludes any that also have the keyword of marketing. So that's it in quite a basic form. There are probably 2 other areas just to touch on as well. Speech marks play quite an important part in the number of candidates you're going to be searching through and that you're going to be finding. So if you wrap a phrase or some words with speech marks, what it does is it returns only those candidates that have those words in their exact format. So in this example, sales manager in speech marks is looking for profiles that contain exactly that. So sales space manager must be there as a string in their profile. Whereas if you remove the speech marks, it's looking for both those words, but they might be slightly separated in a wider part of a sentence or something else. So if I give you an example, if I'm a candidate and my profile is for a sales and marketing manager, in the first example, so with the speech marks, I would not be returned because I'm sales and marketing manager. It's not an exact match. Whereas if you remove the speech marks, then that candidate would be found. And the final bit on Boolean is around brackets. So you can actually add in all of those different techniques that we've just gone through, and you can make really long, quite complex search strings. And when you do that, when you're adding those sections together, you need to use brackets to separate those different components. So in this example here, we're looking for a sales manager, and so the person must have either Salesforce, Dynamics, or HubSpot in their profile. Now, I don't know about you, I've worked in HR tech for about 8 years now. I like to think I'm relatively switched on when it comes to technology and searching. And even for me, I have to think hard about some of these bits and pieces. And when I'm constructing a Boolean search, I need to make sure that I'm actually doing it in the right way. So one of the first sort of tricks and one of the sort of suggestions is that don't just start from scratch. You can use tools such as Resume and CV Library, where they've actually got pre-built dictionaries of these searches. So in here, you can see they're split by industry and then job roles, and you can then add them to your search. So that's a great way if you're recruiting for one of those roles, but you can also use that as a template. So if you then want to add extra job titles or you want to add certain sections into the search, you've got a nice template to do so. Cool. Tip number 2, use synonyms. So one of the other things that's quite amazing is how people can refer to the same job in so many different variations. I see it all the time that one company might call a role one thing, another company might call it something completely different. But actually, when you look at the two roles and the people doing those jobs, they are almost identical in terms of their actual capabilities and responsibilities. But businesses have a way of describing roles in different ways. So taking personal assistant as an example, I think this was an example search for personal assistants in Boston that have registered in the last 28 days as an example. So if you just search for personal assistant, we'd get back just over 6,000 results. Not bad. But if you then add in synonyms for other terms that are similar to personal assistant, such as executive assistant or executive PA or some of the others on screen there, the number of results very quickly increased by 44%. So up to 8,700 odd, just purely by adding in some synonyms, and those would be candidates that you otherwise wouldn't have found. Now, the next good thing is that you don't have to know all of the variations of all of the job titles. Using tools like CV Library and Resume Library, we've actually built tools using AI and big data that actually helps do all of that for you. So if I just show you how that works, you type in the job title that you're looking for, and then using our AI and machine learning, it's then actually suggesting other job titles that it thinks are equivalent or similar that you can add to your search. And then from there, you can remove the terms that you don't want to include in your particular search, or you can click on the white space and it will then use even more data to suggest other job titles that it believes are connected to whatever you already have in the search. And that works across loads of different job titles, across all sorts of industries, and yeah, should hopefully be really good at helping you expand your searches and find the best candidates. In some companies as well, it actually also works for company data as well. And the way that this is built, it basically looks at whatever searches all of our recruiters are running. So if I search for web developer or Java engineer, if I run that as a recruiter, our AI and machine learning knows that there's likely to be a bit of a correlation between those two terms. Now, when there's millions of searches being run on our platform, then that data becomes quite accurate and kind of self-fulfilling and kind of constantly updating. Great, so tip number 3. Tip number 3 is to create resume alerts. So you don't have to be in a resume database every single day. I've seen horror stories for some recruiters that would have an hourly reminder that they would then have to log on to a resume search tool, click run, and check to see that there's no new candidates that have registered in that time. They were doing this all completely manually, wasting loads and loads of time going through that. So one of the great features we offer are resume alerts, where you can define your search criteria, like we've just shown, and you can actually save that as an alert. So what happens is whenever a new candidate registers with us, then you can get notified that their profile is now registered on the database, so you can then go and proactively contact them and reach out to them without you having to think about searching all the time. The other thing you can do, you can tailor that based on the immediacy of the alerts that you'd like. So if it's a really, really high priority role, if it's priority number 1, you can actually set that to be immediate. So we aim, from the point a new candidate registers with us, we aim to send them into your inbox within 3 minutes. If you set that as immediately, that is how quickly we aim to get that candidate to you. And the idea being that the quicker you get notified that that candidate's interested, the quicker you can contact them, and you can hopefully be the first person to talk to them about potentially, looking for jobs with you. Now, if you don't want to get notified as frequently as that, you can tailor that down, and you can either have summaries either hourly, daily, or weekly. So yeah, great way for saving time and actually finding those candidates that otherwise you may have missed. If you were running in and only searching a couple of times a week, using resume alerts, you can make sure that all of those great matching candidates get sent to you straight away. Cool. Tip number 4, so invite to apply. Really cool feature that kind of allows you to blend sourcing and resume searching with the sort of more traditional job process. So what you can do is you can create a search, you can find lots of candidates in our database, and then you can, en masse, you can invite those candidates to apply to your roles. So within a few clicks, you can contact hundreds of candidates that are a good match because you've built the great search to find the sort of candidates you're looking for. Within a few clicks, you can have contacted and emailed those candidates directly to say, hey, I've found your profile, I see you're looking, here's a job that we're currently advertising for, I think you'd be a great match, click here to apply to it. So that's a great way of really driving more traffic to your vacancies. And as we talked about earlier, with the average sort of cost per application anywhere between $25 to $50, actually using our resume database is a far more cost-effective way of driving those traffic and those applicants to those roles. The other great thing as well is that email gets sent from Resume Library. And the reason why that's good is that these candidates have already registered a profile with Resume Library. They know who we are, they already have a relationship with us, and they understand who we are and our brand. So the chances are is they're more likely to open that email and engage with it rather than just receiving an email from a random recruiter email address that they may not know. And then what happens is as soon as the candidate clicks reply, that goes straight back into the inbox of the recruiter. So you don't have a separate messaging platform to keep track of. It's purely that we send that initial email, but it automatically then gets sent back straight to you so you can pick up that chain with them. So tip number 5, and this for me is probably one of my favorites. I'm a little bit geeky when it comes to data and insights and things like that. And I absolutely love sort of diving into data about candidate behavior. Now, 99% of recruiters that are searching on our database use the default date parameters, which is either going to be candidates that have registered in the last 2 or 3 months, depending on their settings. So what happens is when they're running those searches, they're looking for the newest and the freshest talent, which that makes loads of sense. You're going to want to engage with the candidates that have just uploaded their profiles and that are on the market and looking for a new job. But what happens when there aren't enough candidates that have just recently uploaded? Or what happens that thousands of other people are contacting those candidates to try and offer them jobs? You're competing against an awful lot of people for the same candidates. So one of the best tricks that I really like is to change those date parameters to target the more passive candidates and those candidates that are in a role at the moment but are likely to be on the edge of being interested in looking for something new. So on average, we see that people change roles roughly every 2 years and 4 months. But actually that changes quite a lot by different industries and different roles. And that's what you can see up on the screen there. So for example, let's say that I'm hiring a data analyst. I would potentially be looking at those candidates that were looking for roles about a year ago, because the chances are that they found something at around that time. But based on this data, you can see that actually it's now a great time to start contacting them and seeing if they're ready for a change. On the other side, if you then look at other roles such as HGV drivers or CEOs, you can see actually they, on average, stay in their role for a much longer period of time. So for those sort of roles, I would focus my date parameters to be closer to the average tenure or the average duration that candidates stay in those roles. And that for me is one of the sort of the best ways to use resume databases to kind of tap into those passive candidates, the ones that aren't active on the market at the moment, because we know that active candidates that are actively looking are decreasing, and go and sort of hunt after those that were looking a while ago, have got roles, and are now potentially tempted for a bit of a change. So in summary, so yeah, first of all, master Boolean. I'm going to say master Boolean, more understand it. So you can use tools like our Boolean dictionaries to basically pre-write all the Boolean for you, but you still need to understand what the sort of main operators are doing from that. Make sure you use synonyms to expand your searches and find those other job titles that there's hidden candidates that call themselves something that to you and I might sound really random, and we want to use those synonyms to make sure that those candidates get included in our results. Create resume alerts to make sure that you get notified as soon as matching candidates register with us. Use tools like Invite to Apply to contact candidates en masse and invite them to apply to your vacancies. And then finally, if you're struggling with the more recent candidates, if you're not finding there's either enough or that there's enough receptiveness from those candidates, experiment with the dates and go back further in time to entice candidates that registered a couple of years ago, or tailor it based on those jobs. Now, for anyone who doesn't currently use Resume Library or CV Library, as a bit of a thank you for coming along to the session today, we'd love to offer everyone access to use Resume Library or CV Library basically for a week for free. So you can start searching our 25 million resumes, and you can actually start downloading and contacting candidates and hopefully start really taking your sourcing forward. Awesome. So I think that's it for the slides, and yeah, hopefully we've got plenty of time for Q&A.
Thank you, James. That was an excellent presentation. And thank you so much for making this session interesting, meaningful, and insightful.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would like to thank everyone for joining in. We encourage you to visit our agenda tab and explore other topics and speakers in the 4 different tracks. If you do not visit the agenda tab, you'll be automatically redirected to the next session in this track. Thank you so much.
Lovely. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, James.